There is this perception that same-sex couples are wildly rich, especially same-sex male couples. And we have to remember that most of the people in our community, as in most Americans, are not wealthy.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously, where unfiltered truth meets your bottom line with the faint sound of the Wizard of Oz soundtrack in the background. Jonathan Capehart is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, MSNBC anchor, and former Washington Post opinion writer known for his sharp political insight and fearless authenticity. As a Black, openly gay voice in American media, Jonathan has built a career speaking truth with style. In his new memoir, Yet Here I Am, Lessons from a Black Man's Search for Home, is a powerful reflection on identity, resilience, and fighting home. We became fans of Jonathan and because he and David Brooks have probably the most sane debates, political debates, each Friday night on PBS NewsHour. So we're super fans and we're super excited for this interview.
Exactly. It's like having your daily politics in today's environment with a little bit of chamomile tea. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Hi, John David, thank you very much. I feel like I should have a teacup. and dipping my
we actually have
bag of chamomile. Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Of course. We're definitely going to cover your memoir here in just a moment, but there is just so much news coming at us every single day. We'd be remiss to not at least cover some of the headlines for today, especially since that today is the day following when it was widely reported that in this fall, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, will consider for the first time whether to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges, as former Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis is arguing that decision violates her First Amendment protections and extending marriage rights for same-sex couples under the 14th Amendment's due process protections was egregiously wrong. If the court were to overturn Obergefell, what would that mean for existing same-sex married couples, and what do you see for marriage equality going forward?
Well, first, to answer your question, if they were to overturn Obergefell, that would render your marriage, my marriage, and millions of same-sex marriages around the country null and void. And we would go back to the arrangements couples like ours had to get into, legal contracts to, ensure that our partners were covered, that our children were covered if we had children, that inheritance rights were covered and honored. So it would be not just a moral backtrack, but a legal backtrack.
So can you clarify something for me? When and how would Biden's Respect for Marriage Act kick in? Would that then mean all these trigger laws would go into place in some states, and others of us who aren't necessarily in one of those states would still have our marriage respected?
And you know what, John, you raise a very good question. And sadly, this is what vacation brain does to you. I forgot about the Respect for Marriage Act. And the reason why Congress did that was because as a result of the overturning of Roe, Democrats saw what was coming. I remember the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Harris, saw what was coming. And so they pushed to get this done. So you raise a very good point. Will the Respect for Marriage Act keep in place our marriages? Will we have to jump through all those hoops I just mentioned before as a result of this act of Congress? But I have to also remember that it also depends on how the Supreme Court decides this case that they're about to hear. They could decide it in such a way that they might render the Respect for Marriage Act null and void. We just don't know.
Wow.
That's scary.
Yeah. So how do you see that playing out for individuals? I mean, so much of our financial security is wrapped up in our marriage. I mean, that just creates utter chaos for so many millions of households. I mean, I know you already shared what the result would be, but me trying to digest that is a little challenging.
Yeah, I mean, what's going to happen is, I remember in the before times, before I had a super long-term partner, a husband, where I didn't have to think about, well, gee, power of attorney, If I'm in the hospital, are you considered family? Do I have to put in a legal document that you are family and you are allowed to be in the hospital, in the emergency rooms? Those were all the things that same-sex couples had to do, and certainly in the 90s and the early 2000s, just to have not just their relationships respected, just by people, but by the law, but to guarantee that their wishes would be followed out because they have not the law behind them, but signed documents, contracts, legally binding contracts that would force people to um, respect their relationships, our relationships.
Yeah, and you think about that, there's such a huge financial burden, especially on families that may be of at an income level where going to an attorney and spending two, three, four, $5,000 to draft a will, a trust, power of attorney documents, all of these various medical documents, all of that would be a financial burden that they're not able to take on. And so they
Mhm.
don't get those same protections, whereas individuals who may be at a higher socioeconomic level would be able to engage those protections. And it also sounds like it might be a boon for lawyers. We want to make sure that the lawyers that we are engaging, if we do, are ones that actually do support our rights so that we're not giving money to those who don't.
Right. And one more thing, and I think it bears repeating every time. There is this perception, and I understand the irony of me saying this, given where I am. There is this perception that same-sex couples are wildly rich,
Hmm.
especially same-sex male couples. And we have to remember that most of the people in our community, as in most Americans, are not wealthy. And that's why
Right.
Obergefell was so important. It gave to every couple the ability to protect themselves and to lend respect and dignity to their relationships. And to your point, David, um, if Obergefell were to go away, it's going to be those same-sex couples with the means and the resources who will be able to engage those attorneys to be able to help protect their relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One moment, Jonathan. We're going to take a quick break here. Welcome back to Living Not So Fabulously. We're back talking with the author of the new book, Yet Here I Am, Lessons from a Black Man's Search for Home, political journalist Jonathan Capehart. So you recently left the Washington Post. Would you mind sharing with our listeners and viewers why you made that decision? And I'm also curious what your feelings were actually like. How hard was that decision? I mean, because that's a pretty prominent role to have. So what were you thinking at that time when you decided to say, now's my time to leave?
Well, in some ways, it was an easy decision because Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, decided that the direction of the opinion page should focus on personal liberties and free markets. And when he made that decision, our editor David Shipley resigned. It became clear over time that the way I write and the subjects I write about would not fall in those twin pillars. So um, I sat back after he resigned, and we were told, let's just take it day by day until the new editor is named. Well, the new editor was named, and he reiterated, this is the mission. And then he said something in his video that became there were a series of red flags, but this was the biggest red flag where he said, "We are not going to um, dictate to you how you should think about things. We're not going to preach ideology." Well, if you're paying attention to conservative and far right writers, that language is basically code for if you write about race or other things around there that's going to be that's going to be a problem. And then in an email that he sent out after on his first day, he said, we are going to be um, optimistic and patriotic in looking forward. And I just thought, patriotism doesn't demand that we be relentlessly positive about the country. Patriotism demands that we hold a mirror up to the country when the country and her people and her president are not living up to the words written down by the founders. That is also patriotism. And I also want to point one thing out. What Jeff Bezos did on the opinion pages, that is his right as owner of the paper. That is the one part of the paper where the owner of the paper and the publisher of the paper have a right to dictate how the editorial should sound and the columnists who should be writing and what they should be writing about. So I don't begrudge Jeff Bezos or Will Lewis at all, any of their decisions. Those are their decisions. And when they sent out an email to the entire opinion section, hey, this is our new plan, and if you don't like it, we're offering you can have a buyout. The entire opinion section, the entire video section, and anyone at the Post who had been at the Post for 10 years or more offered buyouts. And so in the end, I had to take a step back and look. It was like, you know what? If it was a hard decision, because I'd been there 18 years, 5 months, and 16 days by the time I walked out, by the time of my last day, it was a hard thing to do. But in a lot of ways, they made it easy by changing the direction. And quite honestly, like, here's a bag of cash. Go. So I went, but I left, like a lot of people at the Post, so much talent, so much experience, history, know-how walked out of the door. They walked out of the door because the leadership of the paper said, please go. And that's what I think made it so hard for a lot of people.
We both have follow-up questions. Do you want to go first?
Well, I was just going to point out, before you said they made it easy for us by handing us a bag of cash, I think that's again the financial the benefit of the financial ability, right? You probably are yourself in a financial state where you can weather some of that, but the fact that they also gave you some cash to help you weather some of that, I think is something that a lot of people should be paying attention to right now. Are there options out there that you should be looking at that help you leave a toxic situation?
Right. And the way they structured it is it's literally they don't hand you a bag of cash, they put it into a retirement account. So when you are at this advanced age that I am in, having that go to a retirement account actually is not so bad. And so, thankfully, the big thing that made this decision also easier is that, I'm still with PBS, but I'm also still an anchor at MSNBC. And long before leaving the Post, my position at MSNBC, took on more prominence in terms of, how I structured my week. And so now no longer having the Washington Post and just, primarily focused on, the weekend, which is Saturday and Sunday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern, is also something that also made the decision a little easier than it might have been had I not had, as we say in the Black community, 50-11 jobs.
So my last question before we wrap up the interview for you, it might be a little bit too early, but who do you have on your eye as the Republican and the Democratic? You had to know it was coming for 2028.
Oh no, I knew it was coming, and I'm going to give you a mini lecture because this is one of my hobby horses. Folks, stop focusing on 28. That is about 12 political lifetimes from now. People need to be focused on 26. They need to be focused on the midterm elections. And if people don't like what's happening in the country, that is their opportunity to go to the ballot box and change the political dynamics in Washington, change the political dynamics in their state houses, who sits in the governor's chair. If there are gubernatorial races, state legislative races, 26 is the opportunity to send to send a message. And so, I even when there's a story and I was like, oh, we should do something on 20, and this person is talked about as someone who's going to run for president. I was like, okay, fine, great. Let him run for president. I'm more worried about whether Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the next Speaker of the House, or if Speaker Johnson is going to remain Speaker, because that has greater implications for the country than speculating whether Pete or Kamala or Gavin or Josh or JD or I'm missing some names, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
With all the speculation about who's going to run for president.
So my follow-up question was going to be to that, and I think it still applies, especially with what's going on in Texas and now maybe California and New York. Are we going to have a 2026 and especially a 2028 election? I mean, do you think there's a real risk of there being some emergency that just doesn't allow that to happen?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a real risk. I was warning about this during the campaign. So was Joe Biden when he was at the top of the ticket. So was Kamala Harris when she was at the top of the ticket. So were Democrats up and down the chain when they were running for their respective offices. Because anyone who was paying attention to what he was saying, what he did the first time he was in office, you could see that where we are right now is what was going to happen. And so the fact that we're even having this conversation about whether there will be a 26 election, that's not a question that is as crazy as it might have seemed 5 years ago, or actually 10 years ago. I can see all the things. I mean, even when the National Guard was sent to Los Angeles, I immediately thought, okay, where else will he want to do this? And now he's sent them to Washington. I live in Washington. It is not, quote, worse than Baghdad, as Stephen Miller said the other day. There's not rampant, out of control, violent crime. Crime is down 26% in Washington this year, 2025, the first half of 2025, over last year. And last year was a 30-year low. So why are you sending the National Guard to Washington, sir? I think we know one. And so it is my hope that people have their eyes wide open and that they understand what's at stake and what could happen. And in the end, people need to understand that a lot of things that are happening here right now are things that have happened in other countries. And when they've happened in other countries, we here in the United States would tut and wag our fingers and write these pieces about how lawless and banana republic-y and, no rule of law and no law and order and all those things. Well, a lot of those things are now happening here. And I think the American people need to, as my mom used to say, get your mind right about what could happen.
David and I could have this conversation all day, and I know you don't have that time.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Well, technically, this is my Sunday, so I've got all the time in the world.
all the time in the world. Well, thank you for spending your Sunday with us. We really appreciate you sharing your wisdom as well as a background in your money stories.
Oh, John, David, thank you so much. This was fun.
So we're rightly excited about this particular interview because it's going to be the first time we actually have a two-parter.
Right. Yeah.
Look out for that second part of the interview coming in the future. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you see, scan the QR code to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insight. And until next time,
stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.